Tonight on Bridge City News, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has announced that his government may be shutting down or relocating our province's drug sites. We have reaction. January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. We hear from Sherry Remus from the Alzheimer's Society about how to help those who are battling dementia. And the number of coronavirus cases around the world is now over 400, including one in the United States. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has announced that his government may close or relocate our province's supervised consumption sites. Kenney says he had read the report from the panel which looked at the impact of the SCS in various communities and says crime and property damage has increased in areas where the sites are located.
Well, there will be a report coming. I've seen an initial preview of the report. I hope that it will be released in the next couple of weeks or so. And it, I think, underscores the concerns that we have had about the negative impact on people and on communities as a result of at least some of the drug injection sites. They're now more than injections, by the way. They're just illegal drug sites that do all sorts of drugs, not just injectables. You know, I think we see pretty much everywhere a marked increase in crime in the area of those sites and social disorder. And negative human consequences in many ways.
The UCP struck a panel last summer to look at the impact of the sites, including crime rates, social order, property values, and impact on businesses. BCN's Loris Alexander hit the streets to get the pulse of people in Lethbridge to find out whether or not shutting down or relocating the SCS is a good plan.
Lethbridge business owners reacting to Premier Jason Kenney's words of the future of supervised consumption sites being up in the air.
It should have never been put here in the first place just because of the proximity to businesses and the downtown core and all that. I know the city's worked hard on trying to revamp the downtown area, and then to put something like this kind of in the heart of that hasn't helped the city.
It's unreal that anyone would expect a functional business in the city of Lethbridge to have to be the one responsible to compensate for increased street crime, you know, people hanging around, people vandalizing your business, people stealing from you. Why would the businesses be responsible for all of a sudden calling that the new normal?
We spoke to Executive Director of Arches, Stacey Bork, who says the situation will worsen if their services become unavailable.
These services are so important for people, and without them, the social disorder issue will actually increase or get worse. You know, people have to remember that if these doors were to shutter, 22,000 uses a month will flow back out into the community.
If it did relocate, maybe not somewhere so public where everybody can kind of see us and judge us. And it takes a lot to come in through these doors, so right, we don't need people judging us on the way in.
Councillor Blaine Higgin wants something done to help facilitate positive change.
We do need help for these individuals in our community. We strongly do. I've been told that I'm not compassionate. No, I am compassionate. I just want to make sure that these individuals get the help that they need. Get into the services, get back into society, because this is what we want best. We don't want them to be dying on the streets, and I don't believe we're going to be stumbling and falling on people in the streets, as what people have said. It didn't happen years ago, 3 years ago. It's not going to happen now.
The UCP government has done the citizens of Lethbridge a favor, and also the individuals that are currently the service users of the supervised consumption site, by encouraging and utilizing and also promoting the emphasis of detox, treatment, and supportive housing.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Premier Jason Kenney says the federal government needs to do more to stop the import of opioids coming in from places like China. Kenney said the Liberals made a big mistake when it eliminated minimum sentences for serious narcotic offences and illegal possession of firearms. He says the recent gun violence in Calgary is related to criminal drug activity and drug gangs engaged in turf warfare.
We would certainly be willing to cooperate with the City of Calgary in a task force to find solutions to crack down on the gun violence, particularly in the northeast quadrant of the city. Look, it's no secret that this is highly related to criminal drug activity, to drug gangs engaged in turf warfare. That's typically where this comes from. It's not the first time we've seen it in Calgary. And so we need, I think, much tougher enforcement of the laws against drug trafficking.
Kenney added that the gun problem would not be as bad had the feds opted to prevent the importation of opioids such as fentanyl from China. The percentage of Indigenous people in federal custody hit a record high last year at more than 30%. Canada's prison authority says what's even more troubling is that in female prisons, that number is even higher at 42%. Correctional investigator Ivan Zinger said the current system seems unresponsive to needs, histories, and social realities behind the high rates of Indigenous offending. He says more needs to be done to resolve the problem. Zinger says at the current pace, within the next 3 years, 1 in every 3 federal inmates will be Indigenous. Having healthy employees usually means a healthy business. Mental health in the workplace was discussed earlier today during a workshop at Lethbridge College. Topics covered everything from psychological injuries in the workplace to the power of volunteering.
Basically what we're trying to do is provide resources for employers to assist their employees with their mental health in the workplace. Typically, employers understand when there's a physical injury, but not so much when there's a mental injury or when somebody's going through a stressful time at home or at work.
This event started out 2 years ago, and it was a lunch and learn. It was about an hour and a half. Last year we expanded to a half day. We had about 27 in attendance. This year we decided to do a full day event, and to hit that 65 mark is really, really excellent.
One of the big things is we hear all the time that we want to remove the stigma and talk a little bit more. But really, we have events like this, and it really is a lot of HR people that show up. But I think we need to start extending that out a little bit. It can't all fall on the shoulders of HR departments, especially in larger organizations as well. We need to start educating and training our leadership, managers, supervisors, the ones that are having day-to-day contact with employees, just to become more informed about what is mental wellness.
According to the Alzheimer's Association, 747,000 Canadians suffer some form of dementia. Around the world, 44 million people battle the disease. January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Sherry Remus is with the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and the Northwest Territories, and she explains one of the best ways of helping someone who's been recently diagnosed with the disease.
They need to deal with the person with understanding and empathy. Compassion, kindness is a word that I would use a lot. They need to learn all they can about the disease and the specific kind of dementia that they have, because it's going to be different for every person. And the dementia they have has different symptoms and different things. Frontal temporal affects communication more. Alzheimer's, as we know, affects your short-term memory.
Sherry Remus with the Alzheimer's Society will have more on how to help those who are battling dementia coming up later in our show. Alberta Health Services is offering 6 free workshops in Medicine Hat to help those who are living with chronic diseases. Chronic disease self-management is designed to help Albertans living with ongoing health conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, cancer, depression, and anxiety. The AHS says their approach ensures an understanding of the challenges people face and provide a supportive environment. The workshops will run 6 till 8:30 p.m. beginning February 5th at the River Heights Professional Center in Medicine Hat. You can register by calling toll-free at 1-866-795-9709. The ethical issue of gene editing grabbed headlines in 2018 when it was announced that a Chinese doctor had edited the genes of twin baby girls conceived in vitro. AHS clinical ethicist Eric Matheson surveyed the current debate about the gene editing and talks about what the future may look like.
My discussion is on identifying between different research groups. So what I'm mainly interested in is the difference between capable patients, patients who are able to give consent, adults like you and I, and then incapable patients, so namely children or infants or people with diseases that where they have cognitive challenges and aren't able to understand what they're agreeing to and so therefore can't give consent.
Matheson's presentation is from research he conducted as a postdoctoral fellow at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. The province has announced that beginning in April, up to 15% of operational funding provided to schools through grants will be linked to enrollment, graduation rates, and filling job market needs. That number will increase to 40% by the year 2022. The opposition NDP says Alberta's new funding model for post-secondary institutions will tie schools and students up in more red tape without addressing the real problem. The NDP say Advanced Education Minister Dimitrios Nikolaidis should instead be focusing on undoing cuts to advanced education. Nicolaitis says the change will build a stronger post-secondary system that ensures taxpayers' dollars are used for teaching and research instead of growing administration. Nominations are now open for the Lethbridge Sports Hall of Fame. The committee is looking for those who contributed in a lasting way to Lethbridge Sports for its 2020 induction ceremony on May 1st. Nominations will be accepted until the end of January.
We get all the nominations in, we put them on the table, and then we go category by category, athletes, teams, builders, and special, and we debate those who are in there. That January 31st nomination deadline is coming up quick, so if you have someone in mind that you think should be involved in the hall, don't waste any time. Go find out. As soon as you can, take a look at the information on the website, and let's get those names out there, because there's many people that deserve to be in this Hall of Fame, and we want to make sure they're recognized.
The Lethbridge Sports Hall of Fame has inducted more than 320 members since its formation in 1985. A hearing began today in the case of a pro-life group in Saskatchewan not being allowed to fly a pro-life flag in Prince Albert. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms is representing the Prince Albert Right to Life Association as it takes on the city of Prince Albert. The case stems from the city's refusal to allow a pro-life flag to fly on its courtesy flagpole in 2017. The city maintained a courtesy flagpole in Memorial Square at City Hall, allowing groups including LGBTQ2 Pride to fly their flags. The Justice Centre said in a release that the city failed to give the pro-life group a reason other than to say it would never fly again at City Hall. One day after issuing a compromise on a carbon tax, Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister pitched the plan to agriculture producers who have faced big bills from the levy. Pallister says a provincial carbon tax would be better than the current federal one because it would not apply to grain drying costs.
This is about recognizing that all of us have an obligation to do what's right for the future. I've never met better environmentalists than farmers, and farm families understand this instinctively. And we have a plan that is going to work better for farm families and work better for all families in our province and work better for the environment as well. So again, I reached out to the federal government yesterday to see if they would like to demonstrate their respect for our green record, but also for the green investments that we're making here in our province. I want the federal government to see the opportunity that I see for them in agreeing with a Made in Manitoba Green Plan that is science-based, that can work better than the plan that they have forced on Manitoba.
The number of cases of the coronavirus has now risen to 440 in China, and the death toll now stands at 9. There have also been a confirmed case in Japan, South Korea, Thailand, and now the United States.
From November to January 15th, we had a Washington State resident, a man in his 30s, who was in Wuhan, China. On January 20th, samples were confirmed by the CDC in Atlanta that, in fact, he carried the novel coronavirus, and he was hospitalized, and we're very happy to say that he is in satisfactory condition, and as of this moment is being is very helpful in us identifying particular people that he may have been in contact with.
Health officials confirmed earlier this week that the disease can't be spread between humans. The World Health Organization has yet to declare an emergency in regards to the coronavirus. The 57 Canadian families impacted by the downing of Flight 752 in Iran are still dealing with the tragedy. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that each of the Canadian families will receive $25,000 in assistance. Toronto journalist Brian Lilley says the money is needed right away.
What we have are 57 Canadian citizens and 29 permanent residents who were blown out of the sky just trying to come home. And the government is saying, we'll offer $25,000 in assistance to the families. What will that cover? That will cover a funeral. That will cover some air travel if you need to go and recover body parts, because you're not even bringing back a body at this point. That will cover hotel rooms. That will cover maybe some legal costs. This isn't compensation for losing your loved one. This is some help.
Brian will also have details of another shooting in Toronto, this one claiming the life of a 15-year-old boy. That full interview with Toronto journalist Brian Lilley is coming up in the second half of our show. U.S. President Donald Trump says he has great confidence in the U.S. Senate as it plunged into his impeachment trial. He says the so-called witch hunt all began with a simple conversation with Ukraine's president.
I had a very innocent conversation with a very fine gentleman from the Ukraine, and it was based on that. People don't even want to talk about the conversation. I got to watch glimpses in between all of these meetings that I just told you about. I got to watch glimpses of what is taking place, wasting time in Washington, and I watched, they don't talk about my conversation. They don't talk about my transcripts. Remember this, when Schiff made up the phony story and he repeated it to Congress and the world, and it was a totally phony story, then I released the transcript.
It is the biggest legal moment to date for the Me Too movement. Opening arguments got underway in New York today for the Harvey Weinstein rape and sexual assault trial. The disgraced movie producer is charged with raping one woman and sexually assaulting another. Weinstein has insisted that all of his sexual interactions with women were consensual. His attorneys have told the judge that they plan to use what they call intimate emails from the accusers to support that claim. The trial is expected to last 6 weeks. As wildfires, including the ones in California and Australia, continue to get bigger and more destructive, tech startups are developing new tools to prevent, detect, and even contain them. As we hear in this next report, this emerging field needs more entrepreneurs and investment in order to succeed.
As massive wildfires like the ones that have ravaged Australia become more frequent, entrepreneurs are looking for ways to combat this growing threat. That's why Stanford scientist Eric Apple developed Fortify, a long-lasting flame retardant that sticks to trees and grass and prevents them from catching fire. Ladera Tech, the company he co-founded, tested Fortify during last year's fire season by spraying it along fire-prone freeways in Southern California, with promising results. The California startup has signed a deal with an Australian company to use Fortify to fight bushfires.
And what Fortify allows is for you to pre-treat these areas that are at most risk of fire starts to stop them from starting in the first place. Because once a fire has got going, it's too late.
Despite catastrophic blazes that have devastated Northern California, Silicon Valley has been slow to focus on wildfires. But that's starting to change as a new wave of startups seek to prevent, detect, and contain destructive fires.
I think this is the time for Silicon Valley investors, for entrepreneurs, for large technology companies, for utilities, all the stakeholders to get to a table and say, how are we going to solve this problem?
Seattle-based Drone Seed is using heavy-duty drones to help forests recover from wildfires. The startup sends swarms of drones to drop seeds onto burned forest land, allowing the company to plant trees much faster than humans with just boots and shovels.
And as we're seeing in Australia, as we're seeing in Brazil, as we've seen in California, that's only going to get worse. It's only going to get drier and hotter. It's not going to get better, and so we have to have better tools to be able to reforest faster.
Drone Seed has financial backing from investors who see a big economic opportunity in saving the planet.
This next 50 years is going to be really challenging. I mean, we have some big problems coming up. And finding a way of reforesting vast areas quickly is going to be one of those key technologies which enable us to build the future that we want to see.
It was another beautiful spring-like day in our city. Not a bad day for the third week of January. The mild temperatures will be sticking around. Complete weather details are coming up. We had a mixture of sun and cloud and mild today. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a look at our weather forecast. Jeanette, the meltdown for our region continues.
Yeah, that's right, Hal. The meltdown certainly does continue as we are experiencing a Chinook. The high today was 6 degrees. The overnight low tonight will be -1, but it's going to feel like -8 with that wind chill. Keep in mind, with Chinooks comes lots of wind. 8 degrees is the high tomorrow with increasing clouds. Now that wind is going to start at 30 kilometers per hour and gust all the way to 70 kilometers per hour by the afternoon. And then the overnight low will be 4 degrees. Looking into the 5-day forecast, increasing cloudiness also for Friday, a high of 8 degrees, and then a lovely 8 degrees expected for Saturday with lots of sunshine. A mix of sun and cloud expected on Sunday with a high of 4. Could be a really nice skiing weekend. Monday's high 6 degrees and a 4-degree high for Tuesday with also some increasing cloud there. Average highs and lows for this time of year. Average high -2, average low -14. The highest temperature on this day was back in 1942. It was 15 degrees and the low was a freezing -38. That was back in 1969. The sun rose this morning at 8:17 a.m. and it just set a little while ago at 5:09 p.m., giving us a couple more minutes of daylight today than we had yesterday. Looking across the nation to tomorrow's highs, Victoria and Vancouver expect some scattered showers there on the coast. Victoria's high 11, Vancouver's high is 10. Edmonton should see a nice 1 degree day, and a lovely 5 degrees expected tomorrow in Calgary. Across the rest of the prairies, -4 expected in both Saskatoon and Regina, with a mix of sun and cloud and increasing cloudiness over in Winnipeg tomorrow, their high being -7. Looking further in the country over to the east, Toronto will see a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 2 degrees, much the same for Ottawa, and same conditions for Montreal as well, as we stay kind of in that steady 2-degree range across that region. Looking into Atlantic Canada, lots of sunshine expected tomorrow in Fredericton, high of 2 degrees, high of 3 in Halifax, and Charlottetown's high is 1 degree. Now, St. John's, Newfoundland is going to be a -5, that's their high tomorrow, but they are expecting a 60% chance of flurries. I know that's probably not what they want, as they have gone into their 6th day in a declared emergency state. That is your weather.
The Bank of Canada is keeping its trend-setting rate at 1.75% despite issuing a gloomy outlook for the Canadian economy. It is forecasting the economy will grow by 1.6% this year. Now that is down from 1.7% it predicted in October. The central bank says a slower than expected start of the year could be a signal that global uncertainty is affecting Canada more than previously predicted. Bank of Montreal Chief Economist Doug Porter calls the outlook a dovish surprise from the Bank of Canada. He believes growth will bounce back quicker than most people realize. The annual inflation rate came in at 2.2% last month for the second straight month. Stats Canada says gas prices were up 7.4% from a year earlier when crude prices fell thanks to a global oversupply. Growth in fresh vegetable prices slowed to 1.5% from 7.1% in November. Now, excluding gasoline, the annual price of inflation was 2%, which is the smallest increase in 13 months. Both of our country's major airlines have announced that they will begin another peak summer season without Boeing's 737 MAX jets. Air Canada says it removed its fleet of 24 MAX 737s from its operating schedule until June 30th. WestJet announced yesterday it'll remove the plane from its schedule until June 24th. The move follows Boeing's latest guidance yesterday that the plane will remain grounded until the middle of this year. Volkswagen has pleaded guilty to all 60 charges it was facing in Canada related to the emissions testing scandal. The German automaker and the Crown submitted an agreement statement of facts in Toronto court earlier today. The feds charged VW with 58 infractions under the Environmental Protection Act after it was revealed it had rigged software in diesel engines to cheat on emissions tests. Volkswagen also faced 2 counts of providing misleading information. Toyota is recalling 361,000 vehicles around the world to replace the Takata airbag inflators that could explode and hurl shrapnel. The recall covers certain RAV4, Celica, and Supra vehicles dated from 1997 to 1999. They have older inflators that use volatile ammonium nitrate to fill airbags in a crash. Those are the devices which led to numerous deaths. The inflators in the latest recall can also explode with too much force, spewing metal fragments. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up almost 28 points on the day to 17,599. The Dow was down close to 10 points to 29,186. The S&P 500 was up almost 1 point to 3321, and the Nasdaq was up almost 13 points to 9383. Oil was down $2.25 to $56.13 per barrel. Natural gas was up 2 cents to $1.91. Gold was unchanged at $1558.79 per ounce, and silver was also unchanged at $17.84 an ounce. Wheat is at $232 per metric ton, barley's at $237, canola is at $4.79, and corn is at $278 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 20 cents on the day to $126.48. Feeder cattle were down $1.15 to $1.45. Lean hogs were up 20 cents to $67.95. And the Canadian dollar was unchanged on the day at 76.13 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has announced that his government may close or relocate our province's supervised consumption sites. Kenney says he had a look at the report from the panel which looked at the impact of the SES in various communities and says crime and property damage has increased in areas where the sites are located. Some are applauding the potential move, while others, including Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips, says closing the SES will cause more harm than good. Former Quebec Premier Jean Charest has said he is not interested in seeking the federal Tory leadership. So who are the contenders? Political journalist Brian Lilly gives us his thoughts next. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Men, young and old alike, are invited to come join the Lethbridge Christian Men's Choir. Practices are held every Thursday from 7:30 to 9 p.m. at Trinity Reformed Church. The choir practices are in preparation for spring concerts as well as occasional performances at the hospital and seniors' homes. For more information, call 403-328-7985. Do you have a flair for the dramatic and great comedic timing? Shakespeare in the Park is holding auditions for the 2020 season of Shakespeare's comedy, The Merry Wives of Windsor, on Friday, January 31st from 7 to 9 p.m. in the ATB Community Room at CASA. Come prepared to present a 1 to 2 minute monologue. To sign up, email steph.savage88@gmail.com. Celebrate Family Day at the Galt Museum and Archives for their second annual free pancake brunch. Taking place on February 17th beginning at 10 a.m., come and enjoy delicious pancakes, music, crafts, and games. And while you're there, check out the exhibits and complete a special treasure hunt. Admission is free. For more information, visit galtmuseum.com/events. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
A 15-year-old boy in Toronto was shot dead by a classmate on Monday. The suspect is said to have ties to a gang. Joining me now to talk about it is Toronto journalist Brian Lilly. Brian, as the shooting news was spreading, our PM's Public Safety Minister Bill Blair was discussing the need to seize rifles from licensed gun owners.
A bit of a bizarre stretch for Public Safety Minister Bill Blair, but that's where the Trudeau government wants to go because they don't really know how to deal with people like those that killed 15-year-old Cefalo Kasari. He's 15-year-old student. He's leaving. It happened at 3:10 p.m. Hal. Busy intersection in the Scarborough, east end of Toronto. Kids walking home from school, headed toward a bus stop, and shots rang out. A 15-year-old is dead, and a 15-year-old is in custody. Young Mr. Kasari, police say they have no interactions with him ever. They've never talked to him. The euphemism, known to police. He's not known to police, but the person they have in custody is, and in fact, there are gang ties. What do we know about gun use in Canada? Is that most of the homicides that are committed with firearms are committed by gangs. Most of the gang guns that are used are smuggled in from the United States. What is the Trudeau government's answer to the gun crime, whether it's dealing with Cefalo Kasari's death or any other? It's to say, well, we know where the licensed gun owners are. Let's take their guns away from them, and that will make it look like we're doing something. That is not the answer here. Taking away somebody's AR-15 or their, Ruger Mini 22 is not the answer to this situation. It's dealing with guns smuggled into the border. It's dealing with guns and gang units, whether we're talking about, Toronto or Ottawa or Surrey, British Columbia or Calgary. You talk about any major city. These are the issues that they're dealing with. Talk to police chiefs across the country, and they'll say in rural areas, yeah, it may be different, and maybe long guns are the issue. But and regularly they're stolen from somebody's home. But in the urban centers where the majority of the gun crime is happening, it's not where the Liberals are looking. And for them to be doing this at the same time as a 15-year-old has died as the result of another 15-year-old who has gang ties, this is deeply disturbing.
Yeah, go after the crime, definitely. The Canadian government, Brian, is offering financial assistance to the families of those who were killed when Ukrainian International Flight 752 was shot down. I think it's $25,000 per family. Brian, you say this is the right thing to do, despite Ottawa receiving some backlash.
Yeah, and look, Hal, that I am not a big fan of Justin Trudeau, and I can be a harsh critic of him. But for the most part, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has handled this well. Maybe in a minute or two, we'll get into where he made a sidestep that wasn't the best move. But when it comes to offering what I'm calling assistance for the families, because the government called it compensation, a lot of people took issue with that. They said Iran should be compensating. Well, Prime Minister Trudeau made clear, yes, Iran should be compensating. But, the mullahs in Tehran aren't going to be coughing up money anytime soon. And what we have are 57 Canadian citizens and 29 permanent residents who were blown out of the sky just trying to come home. And the government is saying, we'll offer $25,000 in assistance to the families. What will that cover? That will cover a funeral. That will cover some air travel if you need to go and recover body parts, because you're not even bringing back a body at this point. That will cover hotel rooms. That will cover maybe some legal costs. This isn't compensation for losing your loved one. This is some help. In the meantime, I've had people say to me everything from, well, you should have travel insurance. Well, that may not kick in, because how do you prove that your loved one was on the plane? How do you prove that they're dead? Is there a death certificate? Is Iran going to cough that up anytime soon? They've got immediate needs now, and I don't have an issue with this. The other problem that I have with some of the backlash that the Trudeau government is facing is people saying, well, these are hyphenated Canadians. Why were they going there? Well, my parents are immigrants. My parents came to this country in 1968 from Scotland. They still go back to visit family. And that's what many of these people were doing. They were going over during the Christmas vacation to visit family. Whether they're Christians or not, they were going at that time to visit family. And tensions were not ratcheted up when they went there. They were when they left, but they weren't when they went there. And they were blown out of the sky. It's not their fault. Why should their families have to suffer? Why are we saying these are hyphenated Canadians? They're not real Canadians. Nobody would say that about my family, and my parents still have accents. They could travel on 2 passports. They don't. And I'm betting that a lot of the Iranian Canadians that were on that flight only traveled on their Canadian passport, even though Iran doesn't recognize dual citizenship. We need to put this aside and support those in our communities who are suffering.
And Brian, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau seems to have gone back and forth as to who's to blame for the shooting down of Flight 752. He blamed Trump, and now he's blaming Iran again.
Well, originally he blamed Iran, and then, there's a lot of pressure from the media and probably from people within his own party to say, well, no, this is because Trump escalated tensions in the region. And a lot of media questions, primarily driven by CBC, but not exclusively. But I'm going to, they're the biggest outlet, and they kept pushing this. This is because of Trump. This is because of Trump. And then he was sitting down and he was doing an interview in Vancouver with Global, and he said, well, it's because of tensions. And then he was asked again, well, are you saying this? And he said, well, it's because of tensions. And he seemed to be trying to spread blame around. That didn't sit well. And I can tell you 100% he heard from the Iranian Canadian community en masse saying, don't you dare try and blame this on anyone except the regime in Tehran, because those are the people that blew our families out of the sky. Iranian Canadians came here for a reason, Hal. They came here to escape the despotic regime that they fled from. And they're not willing to sit there and listen to someone say, oh, well, you attacked a terrorist who has led to death and destruction in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Iraq. They're not willing to sit there and say, well, because you killed him, it's okay to kill Canadians. They're not willing to listen to that. So Justin Trudeau heard from those people loudly and clearly, and then, just before last weekend said, no, Iran is clearly to blame. I give him kudos for saying that at the beginning. I hit him in the middle when he was waffling, but I'll give him kudos again. Iran is the only place to put blame on this.
Jean Chrétien's former chief of staff has become the latest Liberal to say Canada should trade Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou for the 2 Michaels being detained in China, and it's a move that Trudeau has outright rejected.
Yeah. Okay, you're going to be shocked again. I'm going to give kudos to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But why on earth would we be sitting here saying, let's do a prisoner swap? This isn't the Cold War. China is supposed to be someone, a country that we trade with, a country that we have a lot of exchanges with, and suddenly they're going to kidnap our people to get one of theirs back. We have Meng Wanzhou in custody because of an extradition treaty with the United States. China desperately wants an extradition treaty with Canada. Okay, well, if you want one with us, then you have to respect the one that we have with the United States. But they don't want to do that. So they arrested, or kidnapped, as I like to call it, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, and said, we're holding these people until you let Meng Wanzhou go. Why do they want to do that? Because they don't want her going on trial in the United States for subverting sanctions against the country of, well, the country we were just talking about, Iran. And, because that could open up Huawei to all kinds of questions about their financial dealings, about their technological dealings with a regime that is on the outskirts, on the outside of where the Western liberal democracies are in this world. It could cause them an awful lot of embarrassment. They don't want that, so they want to do anything they can, both as a company and as a country, to stop that. We shouldn't be giving into that. And yet, unfortunately, Eddie Goldenberg, Chrétien's former chief of staff, has talked about this. Chrétien has talked about it. John Manley has talked about it. Thankfully, some of those around Chrétien have also said, this is a dumb idea and we shouldn't do it. That's where I stand.
Brian, former Quebec Premier Jean Charest says he is now no longer interested in seeking the federal Conservative leadership. Did former PM Stephen Harper maybe help influence his decision a little bit?
I don't actually think so. Look, I talked to an awful lot of people that are close to Stephen Harper after that story came out that said Stephen Harper resigned as one of the members of the Conservative Fund of Canada board. That's the fundraising arm of the Conservative Party, so that he could spend his time trying to take on Jean Charest and make sure that he didn't become leader of the Conservative Party. And they said, yeah, he doesn't really like the idea of Jean Charest becoming Conservative leader, but that's not why he resigned. It was getting in the way of business. It was taking up an increasing amount of time for Stephen Harper to sit on this volunteer board. It was not good for business. It was not good for the party, because the party has to eventually move on from its founding leader. And so there were an awful lot of people, both inside the party and out, saying Harper needed to go. Charest ended up leaving for a couple of reasons. And in the interview that he gave to French CBC, that should tell you everything you need to know. Where did the guy that wanted to lead the Conservative Party go when he wanted to talk about why he's not running? The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. If you're going to go there, maybe you shouldn't be looking to lead the Conservative Party of Canada. But what did he talk about? He said, well, I'm kind of offside of them on the environment and on guns. He could have massaged his position on the environment. He was Brian Mulroney's he was Canada's first environment minister. He could have massaged that and found a way to make it work. He would have had to have walked back his position on gun control. But here's the real reason that Jean Charest is not running. There was a court decision last week that there was a former lead fundraiser for the Quebec Liberal Party who wanted to make sure that his emails and his communications trying to raise money for the Quebec Liberal Party were not made public. And the court said, no, these can be made public. Those are damning to Charest. In addition to the fact that he was a lobbyist for Huawei, trying to argue the same position as Eddie Goldenberg and John Manley, which is not popular with Canadians, these emails show people acting in his name in a very unsavory manner, trying to get money for the Quebec Liberal Party. You can get a metro, subway contract, or you can get a highway contract. Just donate enough money, you'll get a contract. That's not how we want to be doing politics in Canada, and that's what did Jean Charest in.
So who are the front runners right now? Peter MacKay and maybe Pierre Poilievre?
Really, there's, I guess, 4 names that have said they're interested or going to run, and that's Peter MacKay, Pierre Poilievre, Erin O'Toole, and Marilyn Gladu. Marilyn Gladu is the only woman. Now, I want to make this clear. None of them are officially candidates, because to do that, you have to give the party, I believe it's a $25,000 deposit and 1,000 names. And then you got to give another $25,000. Eventually it becomes $300,000 and 3,000 names that you've got to give them. None of them have come close to doing any of that. Marilyn Gladu is trying to raise her profile. She doesn't really have a hope of winning this at this point. Erin O'Toole went from 0 to 3rd place in the last election. Pierre Poilievre is running as the true blue Conservative. And Peter MacKay at this point is kind of running as the front runner, because he was, of course, one of the founding members of the modern Conservative Party, the last leader of the PC party, and a key cabinet minister for Stephen Harper during his entire time in office. So, for people that want to make that red Tory reform divide, it's tough to do that with Peter MacKay, because he was so integral to Stephen Harper's government.
Brian, as we reported on Bridge City News, the United States has now ratified the new NAFTA deal, but Canada hasn't yet, and I assume that will change with Parliament resuming next week?
Yes, so apparently the government will introduce a Ways and Means motion to ratify the USMCA, new NAFTA, USMACA, CUSMA, whatever you want to call it. They want to bring it into effect next week. So on Monday, January 27th, a Ways and Means motion will be introduced. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out because the NDP, of course, is opposed to it. The Bloc is wishy-washy. The Conservatives had been supportive of it, but now they don't really have a leader. Andrew Scheer is going to have difficulty whipping his vote. The Conservatives do have some legitimate concerns, despite being the party of free trade, some legitimate concerns about changes that have been made by the Democrats in the U.S. or concessions that Trudeau made during the original negotiation. So will it pass? That's not as clear-cut. Likely it will, but it's not as clear-cut as it was, say, 4 months ago.
Prince Harry is back in Canada with his lovely wife Meghan and their wonderful son Archie. Now, Brian, you've written that Harry should become our next Governor General. Why is that?
Well, I said he would be a better Governor General than the astronaut who's currently holding the office. And, you know, I would like to say no disrespect to Julie Payette, but let's face it, she's shown disrespect for the office. The woman that currently holds the office shows no interest in doing the duties that are required of it. She actually has bristled at showing up for things like signing a bill into royal assent. Well, that's one of your main jobs when you're Governor General. They wanted a ceremony to bring the legalization of marijuana into law. They want to have a ceremony for that. She refused to show up, which meant the Supreme Court Chief Justice had to do it. Well, that's not quite the same. Whether you agree with the legalization of marijuana or you disagree with it, the job of the Governor General isn't to pick sides. The job of the Governor General is to do the job, the ceremonial duties. So she's refused to do that. Meanwhile, she's out lobbying for Canada to get a seat on the UN Security Council because Justin Trudeau wants it. Well, that's not her job either. Ambassadors are showing up to present their credentials, and she's saying, are you going to vote for Canada? Well, you're an ambassador presenting your credentials. You can't do anything until the Governor General gives their approval. And she's saying, are you going to vote for Canada? That puts them in a bad position. She's not doing a good job. Unfortunately, due to the agreement with the Queen that came out over the weekend, it looks like this is unlikely to be even a possibility because Prince Harry will not be allowed to represent the monarchy in any way. It would have to be an extra, I guess, exception to the deal they came up with. But he would do a better job than the astronaut.
Canadian Tire has been taking on some bad publicity lately for accepting $2.7 million from Ottawa to install electric vehicle charging stations. Now, Brian, this reminds me a little bit of the Loblaws fiasco, accepting millions for their new fridges.
Well, I mean, doesn't that make you think of that immediately? I mean, Loblaws. Look, I shop at Loblaws on a regular basis. I bought a steak there earlier today. Love Loblaws. I have no issue with the company, but why do you? Very profitable. You're taking all my money for the food. You got all the food. Why do you need money for your fridges? They took a lot of heat for that. Now Canadian Tire, another one of my favorite stores. You know, you just walk in, you smell the tires, you smell all the man stuff. You're taking $2.7 million to install electric vehicle charging stations? If this is the wave of the future, Canadian Tire should be doing it on its own. You know, that's what they did when they started close to 100 years ago, when they developed the idea of Canadian Tire, of service centers, of gas stations, of places to buy automotive parts, and, well, now virtually anything else. So why do they need government money now? On the one hand, I'm upset at them. On the other hand, I'm reminded of the story of the BlackBerry CEO. Justin Trudeau went out to BlackBerry's facility in Canada, in Ottawa's West End, and they have a self-driving car facility there. A bunch of engineers trying to make cars drive without you or I behind the wheel, which may be good or bad thing. And the CEO was asked, well, did you need this $40 million? And he said, no, but they were offering it, so I took it. So I kind of think maybe Loblaws and Canadian Tire are in that position. It's like, well, I didn't need the money, but the government's going to give it to me. I'll take it. I think you and I might do the same.
Absolutely. If we had our own businesses, yeah, bring the handouts. We'll definitely take it. Toronto journalist Brian Lilly, thanks a lot for your time today.
Do you have 2.7 million for me, Hal?
Yeah. I'll write you a check.
All right.
It's on the way. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you.
January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. We perhaps picture an older person who might be a little forgetful, does not recognize people, but this is a disease that the average person has to learn so much more about. Sherry Remus is the Community Relations with Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and Northwest Territories. Welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Hal. I'm great to be here.
So January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. You want this to be Alzheimer's Awareness Year, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
What do you want our viewers to know about Alzheimer's?
Well, one of the biggest barriers to living a quality of life, Hal, with diagnosis of dementia is stigma. I don't know anything about living with dementia, and I'm not a caregiver for somebody with dementia. So what we've done is we've introduced 8 ambassadors from across Canada who are telling their stories. Who better to tell us what it's like to live with a diagnosis of dementia and the stigma of it than those people who are living with it right now. This month, the campaign is called I Live with Dementia, Let Me Help You Understand. www.ilivewithdementia.ca is where you can find all the stories that these people are sharing.
How common is dementia in our province here in Alberta?
Well, actually, in Alberta, it's about 25,000 people currently have a diagnosis. In Canada, it's about 564,000 people.
And it's not just seniors either.
Oh, no. The thing is dementia is not a disease of old people. What it is a disease of the brain. And unfortunately, it does start to show itself in people over 65.
What about people who've suffered a concussion?
Well, there is some research that's being done on that with the sports figures that are coming out and saying, you know,
a lot of football players,
hockey players.
Right.
There's not enough research that's been done yet and no statistics yet, but they are still doing research on that.
Sherry, what are some of the symptoms of those who have Alzheimer's?
Well, actually, there are 10 warning signs that we have, and we actually have a pamphlet that I've brought in, Hal, that has the 10 warning signs. But to make it easier for people to understand, what it is things like you put your shoes in the dishwasher, you go to the grocery store and you buy a liter of milk, and you come home and there's 5 liters of milk in there because you've forgotten. There are Post-it notes everywhere as reminders for you. You get lost 2 blocks from your home. You get angry really easy, or you get really emotional, and those are not your normal kind of emotions. You forget the names of your children or your spouse.
So regular tasks become that much more challenging as well for people suffering from dementia?
Certainly. Things like trying to balance your checkbook can become really difficult for somebody who's suffering from dementia.
Do people still do that?
It's a good point, but people over 65 probably do.
I understand that people can have mild cases of dementia. Sherry, what does that actually look like?
Well, the thing about dementia is it's a very progressive disease. So you may show signs of mild forms of dementia depending what kind you have, but it is going to progress over time. Now, some people may have symptoms that may take years to progress, and other people it may take just a matter of months.
How does dementia really affect those who love us the most? You know, our caregivers, you know, maybe our children. Let's say if mother or father suffers from dementia or Alzheimer's, how does it really impact the rest of the family? Oh,
it impacts it in many ways. One of the biggest ways is the caregiver. The caregiver usually looks after the person at home for a very long time, and so they're maybe managing a full-time job and trying to take care of this person at home. There's a lot of guilt that comes with it. A lot of times the children don't understand, if it's their parent, they don't understand what, you know, why the parent says, oh, well, there's something wrong with them, and they're going, no, they're fine. But you can hide a lot of the symptoms for a long time.
How often do you find that some family members maybe get so frustrated to the point where they say, I'm going to leave mom and dad to the professionals, I don't want to see them anymore? Hopefully that's not the case, but people are people, right?
Right. The thing to remember is that dementia affects everybody differently. And because there's over 100 different types of dementias out there, and everybody's different, if you know one person with dementia, you know one person with dementia. So a family member, you know, seeing that person may think of their grandma who had it and think, oh, I don't want to deal with that. Well, it's different with each person. So they got to think about the person beneath the disease.
What advice would you give to someone then, Sherry, who has a family member who's been recently diagnosed with dementia?
They need to deal with the person with understanding and empathy.
Compassion.
Compassion. Kindness is a word that I would use a lot. They need to learn all they can about the disease and the specific kind of dementia that they have, because it's going to be different for every person. And the dementia they have has different symptoms and different things. Frontal temporal affects communication more. Alzheimer's, as we know, affects your short-term memory.
How about programs available to help those deal with dementia?
Well, the Alzheimer's Society has a lot of programs that are in place to help people. We've got caregiver support, we've got one-on-one telephone support, we have a lot of resources in our office, and we have client service people who are there to answer questions and to help people go through the sometimes very difficult paths that take place when you're trying to find supports.
I've heard people tell me in the past, Sherry, that you have to keep the brain's like a muscle. You have to keep it active. You have to keep working it. Are there certain maybe games that we can play, utilizing our brain to be able to prevent maybe the onset of dementia?
Well, there are things you can do, and they're the things that people always tell you to do. You need to eat right, you need to exercise, and you need to get enough sleep. But there is one other thing, and yes, it is taxing and challenging your brain all through your life. Now, that means doing things more than just crossword puzzles. That means maybe reading books more. That means learning a new language, socializing, being very socially engaged. Hell, something as easy as using your mouse with your non-dominant hand to work the computer, that's taxing on your brain, and it works it.
But somebody with dementia, Sherry, that really doesn't define them as a person, does it?
Oh, no, not at all. The emotional part of the person is always there, even if their memory starts to fade. The person that you know is still that person emotionally, that tie is still there. So if you go to visit them and they don't remember you, they still remember the way you make them feel. So holding a hand sometimes can make such a difference in a person with dementia's life.
How about if you have a family member, let's say a mother, maybe a grandmother or grandfather, who's suffering from dementia, maybe the onset of Alzheimer's? They don't want to admit to it, but you're seeing a lot of the symptoms, maybe the agitation, the forgetfulness, and so forth, maybe the onset of dementia. How do you broach the subject with them? How do you say to them, you know what, you may be suffering from this, and they're going to refute it and say, no, I'm not, I'm fine. You're the one that has the problem. Because you probably hear about that too, right?
Oh, it's very
So how do you
huge.
handle that situation
It's
with
a
that
tough
family
one.
member?
I'm not going to try and tell you how to do it each for like
Every case is different.
For every
I know,
case
right?
is different. So I
Well,
always
what's been
recommend.
successful, yeah.
I always recommend people call the Alzheimer's Society at 403-329-3766 and talk to one of our client services people about the specific situation that you have concerns about, because it's going to be different for each person, and it depends on your family life. It depends on the relationships. Depends on what kind of caregiving they have or don't have. Unfortunately, I can't give you just one answer fits all, Al.
Are there some people who are a little nervous about going to a doctor, perhaps, being diagnosed with dementia?
Well, it comes down to the stigma. There's a big fear of being diagnosed because they're afraid of how they're going to be treated by others once somebody finds out they have the diagnosis. That means maybe they're not invited to social activities like book club. Maybe they don't get invited to do certain projects or tasks anymore because they think they won't be able to manage it anymore. They get sort of socially shunned, and same with the caregiver who gets socially shunned as well. I don't like the word shun, but I can't think of a better way to describe how terrible it is for the two people that are affected.
Has any research come forth and maybe new medicines to be able to reverse the onset of dementia?
Unfortunately, there's nothing that can reverse anything. They are certainly doing a lot of research at nationally and provincially at Edmonton, Calgary, and here in Lethbridge at our research department here to try and find ways to fix the disease, to maybe find a cure, but if nothing else, to at least mitigate some of the symptoms.
For people that have severe dementia, and again, they've got that support staff, they've got the support system around them, whether it's medical professionals in their own family, what advice would you give to that family for somebody who maybe their parent has gone almost way too far, like it's so far gone, the dementia?
Well, that just means they're in the final stages of the disease, most likely.
And what does that look like? What does that look like?
It's different for everybody.
Right.
It depending on the dementia, depending on the person. I'm afraid I can't tell you exactly how that's going to look.
Do people actually forget how to breathe? I mean, certain things?
Well, what
through their
happens
bodies?
is the brain, it's a brain disease, right? So what happens is the brain forgets to tell the body how to walk. It maybe forgets to tell the body how to swallow. So then it becomes difficult for a person to swallow, to walk, to do many of the things that they used to be able to do independently.
How about care homes, care facilities that are available right now to help families who have members who have severe dementia? How helpful are they?
Well, they're a really good choice for somebody who's a caregiver who can no longer look for somebody at their home, or they don't have the resources to do that. There are level 4, level 5 resource places here in town that will do that, and you just have to research them. Of course, like I said before, go to the Alzheimer's Society, give them a call. They can help you to find maybe the right ones for you.
We touched a little bit on programs before. Any research developments in improving the quality of life, or maybe to offer some preventative measures?
Nothing at this time. They're still working on details. They're working with mice, trying to find different things that are working and that aren't.
Why don't you share some of the success stories with me, Sherry, about some of the people you've worked with who suffer with dementia and how they're able to still have a good quality of life?
Well, I've got a great example in mind right now. There's a gentleman named Roger Marple who lives in Medicine Hat, and he has become a spokesperson for National Canada Alzheimer's Society. Roger goes to different places and does speaking engagements. He's actually worked with the National on a 5-page memory tips list that has been worked. He actually has a very active Twitter account that he manages, and sometimes he does other things like that. He was actually here a year ago, if you were at the Brain Awareness event in March, and he was one of the people who was up on stage answering questions. So people like that are inspirational.
That's wonderful to hear. Sherry Remus, Regional Lead, Community Relations with the Alzheimer's Society of Alberta and the Northwest Territories. Thanks again for joining me in studio here today.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.